Welcome. My name is Simon Wolfe and I'm the Managing Director of Marlow Strategy. And I have the great pleasure today to introduce Mr. Trevor Simumba and Professor Oliver Saasa, who are here to discuss all matters relating to the Zambian economy and what the future looks like for that economy. By way of background, Mr. Trevor Simumba is a high-profile senior international development economist with over 18 years of progressive experience in delivering strategic international trade, business development, and economic development advisory services to major government and intergovernmental clients in over 30 countries. He's worked extensively on the continent of Africa. Trevor holds a postgraduate diploma in business and finance from Oxford Brookes University, a postgraduate certificate in macroeconomic policy from Harvard, and a Bachelor of Arts degree in economics, international relations, and diplomacy from Schiller International University. And Professor Oliver Saasa is a professor of international economic relations and managing consultant CEO of Premier Consult Limited, based in Lusaka. Prior to 2000, Professor Saasa served for 12 years as the director of the Institute of Economic and Social Research at the University of Zambia. A Rhodes Scholar, Professor Saasa obtained his doctorate in 1983 from Southampton University in the United Kingdom. So a very warm welcome to the both of you. And what would you say is having the biggest impact on the economy at the moment in Zambia? Is it debt? Is it the COVID crisis, government interference in the private sector? I'd like to just hear your general thoughts to kick things off.
Well, it's a little bit of everything that you have mentioned. There are major challenges at the moment. The COVID, of course, has caused a significant adverse effect on the larger economy and also at the micro level in terms of performance of the average private sector operator at the current levels. But again, COVID came at a time when everything was really grinding to a halt, so to speak. The economy was not performing very well. The debt overhang actually worsened to levels where it was very clear that we were fast moving towards a default. And because of that, we've had challenges of bringing in foreign direct investment. That's so important, not only most of the economic sectors in Zambia, but perhaps the major ones, including the mining sector, who, as a result of these problems, they had slowed down significantly on implementing some of the reinvestment programs that they already actually approved at the board levels. And perhaps more importantly, or prospects of concluding a program with the IMF, which everybody agrees now, even those that are very critical or supportive of government, everybody agrees that we need a program with the IMF that will bring in not only the finances that we are looking for, but also the goodwill, whether we're talking about from the donors, bilateral and multilaterals, but also the investment, including the rating agencies. And right now, the situation seems to be almost across the board, really falling into pieces. But of course, one has to accept that there are other aspects that has affected the performance of the Zambian economy. COVID is one, and some of the stimulus measures or packages that the government wants to put in place, yes, with all good intentions, things are not seem to roll out as expected. For example, the input of the central bank of providing access to finance for the struggling private sector operators. Right now, they are marginalizing the small scale guy, mainly because the risking facilities are not there, and most of them don't have the requisite collateral to be able to access these resources. So really, literally everything where you look at the macro level, things don't seem to work. And you can say we can go on and on at different sector levels.
How do you think these economic impacts are having an effect on people's daily lives? And do you think there are areas for growth coming out of this crisis?
The greatest impact actually at the micro level is that we've seen a significant decline in the national output. So which means that if you look across all the sectors, and this is really this is the first time this has happened in Zambia, where you have all the sectors affected equally, even before COVID. If you look at the mining sector, number one, they've struggled for the last 3-4 years. And now the COVID crisis has exacerbated the problem. If you look at the retail sector, right now, Spar, Zambia, is closing down, has closed down. Food Lovers Market has closed down. ShopRite is still the leading retailer, but ShopRite has seen a significant decline in terms of revenues. Most Choppies is just breaking even, and there are rumors that they will also be closing down some outlets outside Botswana, in Zambia, South Africa, and other places. We've seen the transport sector struggle. The railway sector is on its knees. The banking sector right now is struggling with a huge unpaid loan portfolio, and even that stimulus, so-called stimulus that the government has provided, has not really worked. The uptake has been very poor because, literally, business is so tight and so difficult. So when you look at even what the government is owing local contractors and suppliers, close to about $1 billion or so that they're owing, and this continues to grow. These arrears continue to grow.
I'd like to take this discussion towards foreign investment and foreign investors. So in light of that political situation, and in light of the debt situation that pervades in Zambia, I mean, could you recommend foreign investors to come to Zambia at the moment? What would you say if they were to approach you for your guidance?
Yes, I would encourage them to come to Zambia. Zambia is still a very lucrative investment destination. The problem we have is in the public finances. So an investor coming to Zambia who wants to come and do, for example, a private sector project, maybe wants to invest in agriculture, mining, manufacturing, 100% I would back them up. However, if they're coming to do a government program, for example, a public-private partnership, or anything that relates to government, either lending money to the government or the government having to be involved, I would trade cautiously. I would advise them to trade cautiously. I wouldn't say don't do it, but I would advise them to trade cautiously because, like Professor alluded to, systems in the Zambian government at this moment are completely gone. Look, the debt management system, for example, in the Ministry of Finance has not been working since 2012. Okay? So if you go to the Ministry of Finance today, they are not able to give you real-time data on actual debt flows and debt statistics. This is one of the biggest problems the IMF has with the Zambian government, in that even on the actual debt figures, we are yet to have a fully reconcilable debt statistic. And we have, the government for the last 3 years has not published the debt sustainability analysis, okay, the DSA. No, so that tells you that there's a lack of transparency, there's a lack of accountability.
Just yesterday, I saw that the chairman of ZESCO indicated that Zambia did not need an IMF package to help bail it out of its debt issues. Perhaps we can talk about that. I mean, can the IMF come in and save Zambia? Is that something that you think will benefit the economy? And does Zambia have any other options?
I think, first of all, we need to accept one fact. It is not the IMF's job to save Zambia. Let's be very clear about that. And I think it's very unfair to ascribe the IMF that's Messiah tag. What the IMF can do, and that's why it's important for Zambia to engage with the IMF, and that is why even the minister wants to engage with the IMF. What the IMF does, it provides credibility to your policy, your plan of recovery, number one. Secondly, it engenders confidence amongst the other lenders that, look, if the IMF has endorsed this program and the IMF is involved, it means that it's a credible program and it's something that they can then listen to you and say, okay, you know what? We understand you are facing this situation, these problems. We can see you've got a plan and we are willing to restructure, reprofile, or renegotiate the debt.
I'm really interested in your comments on openness and transparency, but also the treatment of Zambian firms. And I think the great example there is the ongoing dispute between the government and Copperbelt Energy Corporation, CEC. I mean, what is the government's intention with respect to CEC? Because, to my mind, it seems like an upstanding corporate citizen of Zambia and a great example of a local, very well-run company.
Yes.
Why has the government got CEC in its sights, and how do you see them managing that dispute going forward?
I was actually on the Copperbelt just when that story broke about CEC and the government and ZESCO and KCM. Happened to be the Copperbelt, and I was interviewed by Radio Chengelo, which is one of the biggest actually radio station on the Copperbelt, but it's a Catholic church-run radio station. And the point I asked that same question. I said, I don't understand why government is unable to bring all these parties on the table. Let's put the facts very clear. Number one, the government of Zambia owns 24% of CEC. They are actually the government holds more shares than the founders of CEC, the Zambian founders of CEC, Mr. Sindowe and his team. So the government owns 24% of CEC through ZCCM Investment Holding. Okay. Then government is now responsible for operating, and ZCCM itself, again, ZCCM Investment Holding owns a golden share on behalf of government. 3, ZESCO is wholly owned by the government of the Republic of Zambia. So the 3 parties to this dispute all have a relationship with the government of Zambia. Not just the fact that there are companies here in Zambia, but actually government has a financial incentive in all these 3 companies. So the question that comes to mind is, okay, so if that is the case, why is it so difficult for the government to sit these parties together and come up with a solution? Because the reason that CEC is having financial troubles is because KCM is owing CEC for power supply of over 140, it's now gone over $140 million. Okay. Then, because CEC is owed this money by KCM, CEC in turn has not been able to pay ZESCO for the power that they've supplied because CEC has not been paid for it. So ZESCO is now saying, CEC, you're owing me approximately about $90 or so million. Okay? So CEC is saying, I can't pay you because KCM has not paid me. All right. Now, is it not possible in any sensible situation that the government can bring these parties down, sit down together and say, okay, let us find a way to offset these debts. And obviously there will be a balance that will be due to CEC and that can be paid. But the government has not done that. Instead, the government is at the forefront of undermining a wholly owned Zambian company, a company that employs thousands of Zambians, a company that contributes so much to the Copperbelt. It supports a hospital. It supports one of the leading Premier League football clubs, Power Dynamos. It supports housing for a lot of people. It supports schools on the Copperbelt. CEC has been part of the fabric of the Copperbelt, of the mining sector, since the start of copper mining on the Copperbelt.
One of the things that really concerns me is the degradation of the rule of law in Zambia, and then how that affects the commercial and business environment. And I think a good example of that is the passage of SI 57, which of course, as you know, declared all transmission lines common carrier. Now, from where I'm sitting, it looks like a very deliberate political and government action to improve the negotiations of companies which the government controls. And if I were a Zambian investor or an international investor, I think, well, the government is using all of their powers to improve their position in sort of a rational and very politically driven manner. I mean, I'd love to hear your views on that.
Yes, but that's the point. That's the point, Professor is saying, that if you want to analyze Zambia, what is currently happening in Zambia in a normal political economy way, you will fail, because these things are not driven by rational decisions. They're not driven by rationality at all. Okay? The declaration of common carrier, the government did not even realize that it actually also affects ZESCO. They were so much in a hurry because they are driven by political considerations that they realized, oh, they said, oh my goodness. So because if this applies to CEC, it will apply similarly to ZESCO, which means that Mamba Collieries, CEC, and other energy companies can use ZESCO's transmission lines to export power, for example, or to transmit power to a particular client, like the mines or anything like that. So what is going on in Zambia today, unfortunately and sadly, has no economic or political calculative basis. It is all about survival. It is all about survival, and it is all about crippling the opponent. And obviously, as Professor has talked about, the greed.
The question comes to me, what does a company in Zambia do now? I mean, if I go back to CEC, they've extended olive branch after olive branch, and it just doesn't seem to be working with negotiations with the government. All of the issues with Mopani recently, the negotiations don't seem to be going positive places. And then, of course, there's the whole issues with KCM, which has a slightly different comportment to it, but again, remains in stalemate. What does a company do with respect to negotiating its position with the government right now?
Most investors at the moment, even those that are already inside the country, are very apprehensive about how hospitable the investment environment in Zambia is, and whether they can actually expand their business. Now, with COVID-19 and the challenges that it has brought about, cost escalation, you name it, almost everybody is just now on hold, wait, and see. And then also looking beyond in the horizon for 2021, where most investors actually are hoping for a regime change. Unfortunately, that's how the situation is. It's so difficult for me now to say, yes, bring them in as investors. Definitely, that's what we want to see. But you see, the nature of the political environment at the moment, it has made business environment very inhospitable, and that itself has caused a major problem, and especially with respect to the attractiveness. The ease of doing business in Zambia has actually worsened to a level where in the political risks associated with everything that we've discussed has made the environment really very unattractive. But you see, one has to recognize that this is a country where you see a lot of poor people, but which is rich. It's a rich country with poor people in it. The potential literally everywhere you look is there and is massive, and all that you need is to put in place a predictable investment environment. Literally anything, any sector that you look at, whether you are talking about tourism, as an investor, whether you're talking about agriculture, literally anything grows in this country. We control about 35% of water resources in Southern Africa, if we exclude the Congo, where that's the watershed. But if you go down beyond, even southern part of Zambia, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, most of these countries are actually deserts. Outside the seas, we literally can grow anything. Literally, someone has said, you can throw away a broomstick and it will grow, literally. So essentially, what does that mean? It means that the potential is there, and really, we still need to market Zambia. And government, we keep on pushing them to recognize that unless you grow the economy, restructuring never actually change the economic landscape. You can restructure the debt, but at the end of the day, it will grow back because the fundamentals are not attended to. One of the major fundamentals is to grow the economy, create a hospitable environment, make sure that those that come here are comfortable and they're sure and they're protected. Our legislation should bring the security of tenure in whatever it is that they invest. And in most cases, these are things where if you look at our legislation, the problem is not actually the absence of enabling legislation. Yes, you can tinker here and there. I can tell you it's really the application, the implementation of what, and ensuring that the legislation is followed to the letter. There's a lot of breaking the law by no other than the government, where you see that now almost everything is resolved through through litigation. There's hardly anything. If you look at the impasse in the mining sector, many of the problems ultimately end up in courts. But you do not run courts by judgments, by court judgments. You don't run a country through court judgments. And that is really where we are now, where even the government that's supposed to protect the investor seems to actually be, I don't know whether they don't realize the seriousness with which their actions, or sometimes inaction, absence of action, has led to creating a very unstable environment in spite of the potential Zambia boasts of.
So I'll bring it to a close there. Thank you both very, very much for your time. And I wish you all the best as you both form part of the group of people who hope to bring about the changes that are necessary.
Thank you, Simon. It was an interesting discussion.
Thank you again. We'll chat very soon.